Socrates is judged for, condemned to death for very strange, nonsensical, actually, accusations. The accusations really feel made up. They just wanted to get rid of the man. They say that he corrupted the youth in his dialogues, that he inspired them to begin to engage in a irritating form of discussions, irritating also others in following in his footsteps, that he was twisting arguments, turning everything upside down, reinventing religion, that he didn't believe in the gods of Athens, the gods of ancient Greece, and that he was reinventing his own religion, inventing his own religion, coming up with a certain sort of a new type of belief system. Now, perhaps to a certain degree, this was true. If we say that that corrupting the youth is making them think in such a revolutionary way that they are beginning to question the authorities, and the confidence of the authorities. That is perhaps corrupting the youth. Reinventing religion to a certain degree, because he was speaking from a direct experience and not from a belief system. And in this sense, whenever a true sage enters a world of dogmatic religion, then this sage can make a lot of mess, because he speaks directly and he points out something that can seem like turning your back on the gods. But this is, of course, not true in the sense that Socrates kept reminding the gods, and he was very respectful, but it was just a very fresh perspective. Was he turning everything upside down? Yes. Actually, what Socrates used to do is what he felt his task was walking around, especially in the agora, in the market, the Athenian market, finding innocent victims. Some of them rich, some of them are poor, some of them influential people, politicians, some of them ordinary or young people, and they would just begin to interrogate them and to interrogate their belief system, what they were convinced that was the truth. And he would definitely bring them to a certain sense of deep inconfidence. And that, I'm sure, they hated. So all this, is it enough to give someone the poison and to make them die? That is a good question. Perhaps we are reminded of someone else who had to die for no real good reason for something like 400 years later. Jesus. In this sense, Phaedo is as dramatic as the Gospels. Only, luckily, we have many more words, and we can feel the drama even more accurately. But Jesus was another powerful being that seemed to, corrupt the young and turning everything upside down and reinventing his own religion. So when we enter this text, we actually feel the very same drama of the Gospels. We are there in such a live situation, such a scary and intense, heavily charged situation. There is Socrates sitting in prison, sitting on his bed. Any minute, going to be given the poison to drink, and he's sitting surrounded by his students. Students, not only his closest students, but also some who just who came to be with him. And when they are doing their philosophy, it's not. This is the funny thing. When I say it's not philosophical, this philosophy, it's actual, because when they speak of death, when they speak of freedom, when they speak of the soul, this all has a very urgent aroma, you see, because you feel there, you can smell death in the air. So these are not just words. But pay attention to what I just said. I said this is not, it wasn't philosophical. It's because in our language nowadays, when somebody begins to speak in a very abstract way, we tell them, stop philosophizing. Enough with the philosophy. Right? But this was not how it was. Philosophy was a transformation. It wasn't abstract. So it was exactly for these type of moments. This text is not just about what death is, because technically, Phaedo is, by the way, the title is just the name of the main, the teller of the story, the one who tells us what happened to on the day when Socrates died. So another title for Phaedo used to be On the Soul. So it is a discussion of what the soul is, what death is, and is there death? Does the soul survive after death? But it's much more than just a discussion of this topic, the topic of death. It's actually the best book to understand what philosophy used to be and what it actually is if we are getting in touch with the heart of this text. So this was a very short introduction. Now, how is this course going to take place? Basically, what I'm going to do is sit with the text. I'm going to sit with the text and I'm going to read it just as it is, according to the original flow. And every now and then I'm going to stop, explain. Sometimes I will guide us to meditation based on the text. Sometimes I will give time for questions. Surely every time, near the end, I will give time for questions. And this includes online viewers. You are more than welcome to send questions. You can also send them in a written form while I speak. And that is not a problem. Carlos then collects the questions. Then he makes a little cruel lottery, and some of them get to be answered. this is not a regular meditation evening. There are many meditation evenings. They have a very certain, very specific aroma that is, let's say, more calming, more into just deep relaxation, that we feel that we can turn off thinking, you see. But what was special about the Greeks was that we had to engage our thinking. We had to be very wakeful in the way we inquire, in the way we understand. So you will feel perhaps sometimes that your mind is stretching a bit. Sometimes perhaps that you even don't understand, or that it's intense mentally. I will do everything I can to clarify these points, but sometimes it is just a brilliant text. It is such a wise text, and so sharp, and but it's also intellectually overwhelming. So prepare for that. But also the spiritual implications are overwhelming. I don't know how long, how many pages I can manage every time. Who knows? The text is going to dictate my way. In this sense, perhaps one session I will just get stuck in one page, and we'll talk about it intensely because it will be so profound. And another session I will read 10 or 20 pages, and it will just flow like water, like a river. So we cannot know. In this sense, I've estimated 10 meetings, but perhaps this will be a little more. And the meetings take place every Sunday evening, whenever I can, because sometimes I give retreats or seminars, and then obviously I can't do also that. You can sit with the text together with me, either in German or in English, or you can just listen. You can write down, sit with paper and pen or computer, or you can just listen. This doesn't matter what your favorite method of learning is. Sometimes I will recommend something to focus on at home throughout the week. It is your choice whether to follow it or not, according to your passion. I will from time to time need to stop to explain some issues about ancient Greek culture, so we can have some orientation, because we are using something that is spoken 2,400 years ago within a very different cultural context. I think that's it. I think we can already start. And obviously the starting point is also in the text itself, is a sort of an introduction that slowly draws us into that picture of the last day of Socrates, a philosopher who was also a sage, a mystic, and the mystic was also a philosopher. But again, in ancient Greece, this differentiation wasn't so strong as we have it now. One thing I will surely not get right, and that is reading the Greek names in their original way. I don't know Greek, and therefore forgive me for not reading it so well. Anyway, the English version is so far from the way these names are actually pronounced. So let's start. And we have here we have a dialogue within a dialogue. This is how it is. So we have two people, two men, they have a conversation, and one of them, Phaedo, begins to tell the story of the dialogue, and then we enter into the dialogue, you see? And from time to time, we are thrown back to the two speakers. They comment, they give comments, just almost like flashbacks in films. They give comments, and then we fall again into the dialogue itself. We return to Socrates in the prison cell. This is an amazing painting of I don't know who was the painter. I don't remember. Do you remember, Carl? No. So this is Socrates, as you can imagine, and this is the one who speaks to him. Probably either you will know soon. All the students are, as you can see, in a very dramatic situation, because they are separating from the one they admire. This is their teacher. This is their beloved teacher who has changed their lives. And now they are going to lose him. They can't even imagine another philosopher, another wise man that will replace him. So they all cry, but Socrates, as you can see, he doesn't seem like a crying person, right? He is not in grief. So this is a very beautiful depiction. So we begin with Echecrates that speaks. Were you with Socrates yourself, Phaedo, on the day when he drank the poison in prison, or did someone else tell you about it? Phaedo, I was there myself. Echecrates. Echecrates, what are the things he said before he died? Now, it is important to know who Echecrates is. Echecrates belongs to what used to be the cult of the Pythagoreans. And Pythagoras, he had a group of students, a community. It was a beautiful community. But just as we have sometimes in the world nowadays, the world doesn't like communities, spiritual communities, mystical communities that they don't understand. So they began to hunt down the Pythagorean cult, what they considered cult. The Pythagoreans used to be in Italy, and then they were chased into Greece, and some of them were placed in the Peloponnese, a certain part of a region of Greece in the south. So So this is also very dramatic because as a Pythagorean, he knows what it means to be hunted. Do you understand? Because they most probably feel great affinity with Socrates and his teaching. So Phaedo was a direct student of Socrates, and he was there. So Echecrates wants to hear more about this, and probably not only him, but also his group wants to know what happened there on that day. How did Socrates die? Because you can hear a lot about what somebody says, right? This is theory. But you only learn or you become convinced when you see how somebody actually dies, how they face it. Then you learn not only from their words, but also from their action, right? So he wants to understand. He is a real spiritual student. He wants to understand. What are the things he said before he died? And how did he die? I should be glad to hear this. Hardly anyone from Phlius, it's the city where he lives, visits Athens nowadays, nor has any stranger come from Athens for some time who could give us a clear account of what happened, except that he drank the poison and died, but nothing more. That's not much. Phaedo, did you not even hear how the trial went? There is a very powerful speech that is called the apology, that is when Socrates is put to trial and needs to defend himself. And this also exists. So Echecrates answers, yes, someone did tell us about that, and we wonder that he seems to have died a long time after the trial took place. Why was that, Phaedo? Because usually you are executed immediately, you get the conviction, and then you are probably in a few hours or a day. But here it was for a long time that Socrates did not die. Phaedo, that was by chance, Echecrates. The day before the trial, as it happened, the prow of the ship that the Athenians sent to Delos had been crowned with garlands. I will explain it soon. What ship is that? He asks him. It is the ship in which the Athenians say Theseus once sailed to Crete, taking with him the 2 lots of 7 victims. He saved them and was himself saved. This is the myth of the Minotaur. Have you heard of the Minotaur? The terrible Minotaur that was at the heart of the labyrinth on Crete. And he was a sort of half monster, and one of the ways for the Athenians to appease the Minotaur was to send either every year or 9 years, it's disputable, 7 young men. They had to be very beautiful men, don't ask me why, and the best girls, all teenagers, 7 and 7, and they needed to be sent on ship and to be well fed to the Minotaur. So that was a very difficult situation, obviously, very very sad. But then came Theseus, and he came on the ship, and he killed the Minotaur. So, but after that it was tragic again, so don't worry. Now, the Athenians vowed then to Apollo, so the story goes, that if they were saved, they would send a mission to Delos every year. So they would send a sort of their gratitude, their offerings to Apollo for their redemption from the Minotaur. And from that time To this, they send such an annual mission to the god. They have a law to keep the city pure while it lasts. And no execution may take place once the mission has begun until the ship has made its journey to Delos and returned to Athens. Okay? So as long as the ship was on its way and back, you couldn't execute anyone. And that was a sort of a curious situation that perhaps made it possible for Socrates to give his last teaching, you see. It is very important to understand Socrates considered this, as he said, the way the God is leading us. He didn't want to escape prison. He was offered that option. He could have escaped prison. He could have been saved using a lot of money that there were some who were willing to pay. But he refused. He believed that this, he had a sort of a divine voice telling him what he should do and what he shouldn't do in life. And this divine voice didn't tell him to flee, but to stay. So then he was convinced that he had to die. Perhaps, who knows, the fact that Socrates drank the poison was in a way such a powerful event that makes us remember him to this day, you see. Just like to a certain degree, Jesus' crucifixion was so powerful that it created waves that make us now remembering so strongly. Perhaps if Jesus just lived his life, we wouldn't have remembered him so strongly. This is just a speculation, of course. I'm just saying because Socrates kept saying, this is the way the God is leading us. It is a divine guidance. It's not, there is no mistake here. He has to die. Just like Jesus was convinced that he had to die, and Jesus also had his moment of opportunity to flee. He was given that. So this can sometimes take a long time if the wind's delayed. So for some technical reason, the ship was delayed, and Socrates was given a lot of time to stay in prison. The mission begins when the priest of Apollo crowns the prow of the ship, and this happened, as I say, the day before Socrates' trial. That is why Socrates was in prison a long time between his trial and his execution. Echecrates, what about his actual death, Phaedo? What did he say? What did he do? Who was his friends? Who of his friends were with him? Or did the authorities not allow them to be present, and he died with no friends present? By no means some were present, in fact, a good many. It was a big group. So please be good enough to tell us all that occurred as fully as possible, unless you have some pressing business. Phaedo, I have the time and I will try to tell you the whole story, for nothing gives me more pleasure than to call Socrates to mind, whether talking about him myself or listening to someone else do so. So this is a student who is obviously, he loves with great devotion his teacher, and knows that whenever he speaks of him, whenever he remembers, recalls his words, his teachings, he goes through a transformation himself. He he gets his inner confirmation of the truth that Socrates taught. So he is happy to speak. Ececrates, your hearers will surely be like you in this, Phaedo. So do try to tell us every detail as exactly as you can. So Phaedo now starts telling us the story. I certainly found being there an astonishing experience. Although I was witnessing the death of one who was my friend, I had no feeling of pity, for the man appeared happy in both manner and words, as he died nobly and without fear. So it was almost impossible to feel compassion toward Socrates, because he was in a state of exhilaration, a state of happiness. So that it struck me that even in going down to the underworld, he was going with the God's blessing, and that he would fare well when he got there, if anyone ever does. So again, he repeats the feeling that this is guided by the gods. It is a divine calling. It is something that has to happen. That is why seeing Socrates, it gave this feeling that there was nothing wrong about what was happening, despite the pain that all of them for sure felt. That is why I had no feeling of pity, such as would seem natural in my sorrow. Nor indeed of pleasure, as we engaged in philosophical discussion, as we were accustomed to do. For our arguments were of that sort, but I had a strange feeling, an unaccustomed mixture of pleasure and pain at the same time, as I reflected that he was just about to die. So it was a new feeling that Phaedo didn't recognize of. There was pain that was actually unbearable, but there was also extreme joy of the philosophy and the feeling that everything is fine, everything is good. And that was very strange, right? Perhaps you once had it. I don't know if you once went to a funeral, or if you once lost someone that was dear to you, and between the tears, you felt that something is still perfectly all right. That is a very strange combination, because you cry, you feel the loss, you feel the drama of attachment and loss, and still there is some feeling that if you look directly into death, there is also some goodness or love or beauty that is at the very heart of it, and you cannot really explain it. It's surely not socially conventional to say, yeah, but I'm feeling that everything is all right. So this is perhaps what Phaedo felt and what Socrates transmitted. All of us present were affected in much the same way. Try to imagine the picture of Socrates going to die, and all the students and these are all taken by a strange feeling of joy and pain and laughter and tears. This is what he says. All of us present were affected in much the same way, sometimes laughing, then weeping. Especially one of us, Apollodorus. You know the man and his ways. Probably Apollodorus was a particularly dramatic guy that used to cry very strongly, and so on and so on. Now, all the names that are mentioned here from now on, and they are not important to remember, are names of speakers from different books of Plato. So this is clear that they are all students of Socrates. They used to talk with him, they followed him for many years, except for a few. So Phaedo says he was quite overcome about Apollodorus, but I was myself disturbed, and so were the others. And then Socrates asked him who, Phaedo, were those present. I'm going to save from you all the names. It's really meaningless. And then he asks, were there some foreigners present? And then he says, yes, Simmias from Thebes with Cebes and Phaedondes, and so on and so on. But these two names are very important, Cebes and Simmias, because they are going to be the main speakers throughout the entire dialogue. Now, they also belong to the Pythagorean group. You see, just from another place, other places, and that is very important because when Socrates is going to talk to them, he's going to use Pythagorean language. Okay, he's going to use the world of all the terminology about the soul and the afterlife and so on. So, again, he's asking about names. It's very nice to notice that that Phaedo says, Plato, I believe, was ill. Now, Plato is the writer of the text. Because Plato was such an ardent student, a central student of Socrates, he probably felt that he needed to explain why he wasn't on the last day of Socrates' life, right? So he explains here, it's a sort of an alibi that that Plato was ill. Now we know. So, was there anyone else? I think these were about all. Socrates, well then, what do you say the conversation was about? Phaedo, I will try to tell you everything from the beginning. On the previous days, also both the others and I used to visit Socrates. We foregathered at daybreak at the court where the trial took place, for it was close to the prison. And each day we used to wait around talking until the prison should open, for it did not open early. When it opened, we used to go in to Socrates and spend most of the day with him. On this day, we gathered rather early because when we left the prison on the previous evening, we were informed that the ship from Delos had arrived. Okay, so actually that this would be the last day of Socrates. And so we told each other to come to the usual place as early as possible to seize the day. When we arrived, the gatekeeper who used to answer our knock came out and told us to wait and not to go in until he told us to. The 11 were the sort of you can say the commissioners or the police commissioners that were the ones who convicted Socrates, and they now came to prison, so the students couldn't enter. The 11, he said, are freeing Socrates from his bonds, from his shackles. Now, because he's going to die, he's no longer a prisoner, and telling him how his death will take place today. Okay, so Socrates now is sitting unshackled and told what is expecting him, how he's going to die. After a short time, he came and told us to go in. We found Socrates recently released from his chains, and Xantippe was Socrates' wife, She was a very known to be very dramatic woman, and she used to be quite angry at Socrates because he used to do philosophy instead of bringing food and money home. Socrates was mainly living at the expense of his friend Crito, who is also present in the room. And Socrates, by the way, was around 70 when he died, and he had three children. So Xantippe, you know her, sitting by him, holding their baby. Don't ask me how, at the age of 70, Socrates had a baby. That is beyond me. It's not. When she saw us, she cried out and said the sort of thing that women usually say, like in mourning. Socrates, this is the last time your friends will talk to you, and you to them. Socrates looked at Crito. Crito, he said, let someone take your own. Because Socrates, and you will notice it throughout the entire day, the entire talk, refused to have any kind of emotional reaction around him. He wanted to die in silence, nobility, and clarity, the clarity of understanding. So whenever he felt that there was irrational energy around him, he would just immediately resist. So he asks Xantippe to be taken home. He wants to dedicate his last hours to philosophy, not to emotions. So he asked Crito, his best friend, who was around his age, Crito, let someone take her home. And some of Crito's people led her away, lamenting and beating her breast. She is mourning, obviously. So now Socrates remains without his children, without his wife, only with his students. Socrates sat up on the bed, bent his leg, and rubbed it with his hand. You understand why? Because he was shackled, so it was probably painful and heavy. So now he felt his leg free, and he rubbed it. And as he rubbed, he said, "What a strange thing that which men call pleasure seems to be, and how astonishing the relation it has with what is thought to be its opposite, namely pain." He means that he was in pain. Now there is pleasure. Obviously, the pleasure is soon going to be replaced with death, right? And not just death, but by poisoning. So this is again discomfort. So he says the two are actually deeply connected. We humans, we like to pursue pleasure and to avoid pain at all costs. We don't want to feel pain. We cling to pleasure, but we don't understand that pleasure and pain are just a circle. Actually, a mature person, a philosopher, would know that whenever he or she feels pleasure, soon they are going to feel pain. And when they are in pain, soon they are going to feel pleasure. You see? It's like an endless cycle, endless circle. And when you understand this is a part of wisdom. You no longer attach or try to detach. You just let this cycle take place without much reaction. So Socrates says, a man cannot have both at the same time, yet pleasure and pain. Yet if he pursues and catches the one, he is almost always bound to catch the other also. Like two creatures with one head. Can you have this image of two creatures with one head, pleasure and pain? They are connected to each other, inseparable. Only our mind tries to separate and to never let pain enter. Now, one of the major things that the philosopher does, or we do in our transformation, is begin to not be overly impressed by pleasure. The attachment to pleasure, to pleasures of life. You see, when we have pain, when we have suffering, people always comfort us, soon it will be okay, you see? But imagine that when we had pleasure, people would come and comfort us, don't worry, soon it will be different, soon you will be in pain. You will hate that friend, right? You will not want to have such a friend telling you, don't worry, soon this is going to change, your great pleasure. You're going to lose it, don't worry. But, so when we have pleasure, we don't want to end. So we never think about its ending. But when we have pain, we immediately think about when it's going to end, when we are going to be relieved, when pleasure will return. So not being attached and detached is the power of the philosopher. I think that if Aesop was a writer that used to create all kinds of allegories, stories, with that were meant to teach us, fables. If he had noted this, he would have composed a fable that a god wished to reconcile their opposition, to somehow settle the opposition of pleasure and pain, that they don't sit together, but could not do so. The god couldn't do so, so he joined their two heads together. And therefore, when a man has the one, the other follows later. So in a way that we had to experience them one after the other continuously. This seems to be happening to me. My bonds caused pain in my leg, and now pleasure seems to be following. Obviously, Socrates doesn't care so much about the pleasure because he has his awareness, noticing that these two shall pass. This is just another fleeting moment. Cabys intervened and said, "By Zeus, yes, Socrates, you did well to remind me. Eventus was a sort of a teacher, another teacher. Eventus asked me the day before yesterday, as others had done before, what induced you to write poetry?" Did you know that probably Socrates was writing poetry? After you came to prison, you who had never composed any poetry before, putting the fables of Aesop into verse and composing the hymn to Apollo. If it is of any concern to you that I should have an answer to give to Evenus, when he repeats his question, as I know you will, tell me what to say to him. So this is how they start falling into the conversation. Tell him the truth, Cabys, he said, that I did not do this with the idea of rivaling him or his poems. So I wasn't competing with another writer, for I knew that that would not be easy. But I tried to find out the meaning of certain dreams and to satisfy my conscience, in case it was this kind of art, they were frequently bidding me to practice. So he felt that in his dreams, he was encouraged to write poetry. The dreams were something like this. The same dream often came to me in the past, now in one shape, now in another, but saying the same thing. Socrates, it said, practice and cultivate the arts. In the past, I imagined that it was instructing and advising me to do what I was doing, such as those who encourage runners in a race, that the dream was thus bidding me to do the very thing I was doing, namely to practice the art of philosophy. You see, because for Socrates, philosophy was an art that you need to practice. Not only an art, that this being the highest kind of art. And I was doing that. So he thought that he was just being encouraged to pursue his art. But now, after my trial took place, and the festival of the god was preventing my execution, I thought that in case my dream was bidding me to practice this popular art, I should not disobey it, but compose poetry. I thought it safer not to live here until I had satisfied my conscience by writing poems in obedience to the dream. So I first wrote in honor of the god of the present festival. After that, I realized that a poet, if he or she be a poet, must compose fables, not arguments. Being no teller of fables myself, I took the stories I knew and had at hand, the fables of Aesop, and I versified the first ones I came across. So he basically says that he wasn't talented enough to write to write poems himself. He copied. Tell him this to Evenus, Cebes, wish him well and bid him farewell, and pay attention what he says, and tell him, if he is wise, to follow me as soon as possible. Did you hear what he just said? He told Evenus, the other teacher, follow me as soon as possible. Follow where to? To death. Okay? Now, this is an outrageous statement. This is the last thing that anyone would wish another person, right? And wish him to die as soon as possible. That is, so that is such an outrageous statement that this actually begins the discussion. Why would Socrates say something so horrible? I am living today, it seems, as the Athenians do so order it. Said Simmias, what kind of advice is this you are giving to Evenus, Socrates? I have met him many times, and from our observation, he is not at all likely to follow it willingly. So, Simmias thinks that Socrates encourages Evenus probably to commit suicide, to take his own life. You see? So he says he will not do it so willingly. And then Socrates asks, how so? Is Evenus not a philosopher? So here is basically the first thing that we're hearing that Socrates states. A philosopher is meant to be eager to die. A philosopher is one who is attracted to death. One who certainly will not be troubled when death approaches, but will actually rejoice when death comes. And this complete conviction that Socrates has, as we see, it is evident, right? Because he is not only unafraid, he is in exhilaration, he is happy. Now, this is actually the beginning of our journey. How come a philosopher And I hope that now that you are here, you are a philosopher. It's not something you don't need to get a certificate from the academic world. It's enough to just put your head and heart and being into this text. So as a philosopher, why would a philosopher be not only fearless in the face of death, but actually ecstatic? What is the connection between philosophy and death? This is our question. So that's quite a cliffhanger. We are going to stop now, and time tells me so. And now I would like to receive some questions, because it's obvious that from next week we are going to really enter the philosophical process, and this was more like an introduction. Perhaps you want to understand certain things. Let's see here or over there if there are a few questions. Yes.
So if philosophy is somehow also about love of death, does that mean that the philosopher would necessarily know the secrets of death?
Again, if a philosophy is
also about love of death,
is about loving death,
does that necessarily mean that the philosopher also already knows something about the secrets of death, of dying?
So does the philosopher also necessarily know the secrets of death? What do you mean by secrets? To acquire, surely a philosopher is meant to know how to die. Now, perhaps the philosopher knows, or perhaps the philosopher assumes. You see, we can be, this is, you can say the difference, there are those mystics who claim that they know for sure what is going to happen after death. They give you a description. They give you a detailed map. You are going there, you are moving there, you need to do this, you need to do that. We have, for example, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The Tibetan Book of the Dead gives us a clear map. What must happen after death, so you are, let's say, not reincarnated in a wrong way, that you're going directly toward the light, and so on and so on. This is pure mysticism, in the sense that it is, but it also demands us to believe something, right? Because perhaps I don't experience that. Then what am I meant to do? To believe what they tell me, right? So Socrates doesn't say that he knows 100% what is going to happen. He says that he is quite convinced. But as a philosopher, as a wise man, he also leaves room for a mistake, you see? Perhaps he's mistaken. Perhaps death is just death. And then the way you lived and the way you died was, in a way, your reward, you see? Because you lived happily, you lived fully, you lived wisely. You don't do everything that you do just for the sake of the afterlife and the reward that you will receive. This is religion, right? There is meaning to the way you live right now. So in this sense, Socrates says, perhaps, most probably, and he gives descriptions, but he wants you, perhaps he is also sure, but he wants you to inquire. He wants you to do it not on the basis of belief, you see, but on the basis of your own understanding and wisdom that even frees you from dependency on what might happen. Because philosophy, in this sense, just like mysticism, is all about liberation here and now, not about a redemption in the hereafter. That you might that if you do this, you will be rewarded and enjoy some heavenly delights. Any other questions? Yes, please. So you will signal, right? Yes.
Plato wrote the book and made Phado say that he is sick. Why?
Plato wrote the book and used Phaedo to explain what happened. Now, first of all, we need to understand that Plato never appears as a speaker in his entire book, and this is a big book. When I say book, of course, it's a compilation of many books, of dozens of books that some of them we're not so sure that Plato wrote. But in general, Plato is never a speaker, is not a part of the dialogues. He uses others that speak with Socrates, and sometimes it is Socrates that speaks in first person. And he is it seems as if this is his book, you see. Now, why he did that is a matter of speculation. Why Plato didn't believe in putting himself at the center of his own text, you see. For sure, he gave Socrates most of the opportunities to be heard. As I said before, we don't know how much it's Socrates that said these things, and how much Plato just uses Socrates to say certain things himself. So we don't know. It's not the borderline is not so clear. Now, why? Perhaps it was out of reverence to the teacher. Sometimes we have even the Dalai Lama constantly says, the Buddha said, or as the scripture said, and he always quotes the scriptures and the Buddha. Now what, the Dalai Lama doesn't understand himself? He cannot quote himself, you see? And this is sometimes a way of revering your lineage, your tradition, and in a way using the greater one in order and out of identification with this person's ideas. You see, so that's one possibility, that it was out of reverence, or that he felt that he was committed to represent Socrates because Socrates died. And actually, Plato did not plan to be a full-time philosopher. It was only after the death of Socrates. The death of Socrates made him do all this, you see, write all these books. So perhaps that was the reason. So Plato is always like a backstage presence. It's behind everything. He's never inside the book. Yes. Yes.
A question from Paul.
Yes, Paul.
In today's world, why does this way of direct philosophy rarely shake people to the core anymore, like it did to people back in the day? Have we gotten used to a multitude of interpretations, but never truly going to the core of the text's meaning?
Again, in today's world,
why does this kind of direct philosophy rarely shake people to the core anymore, like it did back in the day? Have we gotten used to a multitude of interpretations, but never truly go to the core of the text of the text's meaning?
So why do people nowadays why are people nowadays not shaken by this kind of direct understanding of the text or this kind of transformative philosophy? Why they are not shaken to the core? Well, I don't think that people are not shaken to the core by transformative teachings. It's just that they are no longer used to thinking that this is the one of the most powerful spiritual texts ever written. You see, it is in line with all the great texts of Buddhism, of Hinduism, and so on. So I think that we are shaken by a certain language that and then these texts, they were just appropriated by academic philosophy, which means that because this started also Western philosophy, this way of thinking, this way of analysis, only without the transformation. Okay, so they took the way of thinking and they threw away the transformation. So then, in this way, we've gotten used to thinking that these texts are just logical or rational, and then we've become distant from reading this at all, thinking, oh, philosophy is not for me. Somebody who always comes to my teachings wrote to me, you know, this is the only course, your first course ever, that I'm not interested in, because I'm not into philosophy. And now, this is the thing, is that we don't understand what philosophy is. So I wouldn't say that we're not, people are not shaken to the core of their being by transformation. The people read still nowadays the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Vasishta, for example, the texts, the so-called texts of the Buddha. I'm saying because they are not really. It's not like he wrote them, so. And they were not even documented, the talks in his lifetime, so it's pure guessing, but we are shaken to the core, just not by this type of texts. We no longer understand them. They've become closed. The door is now closed. Now this is what we're trying to do, to reopen. It will take us some time to get used to the language and to the feeling. So that's why today I'm just starting with introduction. Yes?
I just said, thank you. Yes, because it needs it so much. I mean, I started all this with mythology, philosophy, and then take the other road.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly, because
the last words you said, I mean, this is philosophy is loving wisdom.
yes.
And that's a spiritual term of language.
Oh yes, it is.
And,
Yes.
And the thing you spoke about, pain and pleasure, I mean, this is the circle of duality,
Duality, yes.
duality, and if you mention it as a circle, then you start to see that it is one. And
Yes.
to go into,
Exactly. This is how it starts taking place when we the philosophy as love of wisdom. You are right that it is spiritual, but we don't understand how spiritual this term is. We will understand it for sure next week when we begin to understand what is Socrates' understanding of philosophy and why it is so deeply connected to death, because they are inseparable. That's why the course is titled Socrates, Death and Transformation. Yes, self-transformation. Another question? Yes, please. We have, I think, I'll answer 2 more questions. So one and here. Yes.
From Konstantinos.
Yes, Konstantinos.
Dear Shai, did you ever meditate on death? And which was the revelation?
I'm sorry?
Did you ever meditate on death? And what was your revelation?
Did I ever meditate on death, and what was my revelation? That's an interesting question, because I think that in the past 21 years I do nothing but meditating on death. Everything, for me, meditation, spirituality, transformation is all about meditation on death. And because what does death mean if not learning to be naked, stripped of all your identifications, all your relationships, all the things that identify you while you're still alive, you see? Your name, your body, your form, your social status, your role in life, and so on and so on. Who would you be without all this? This is meditation on death, right? Because you know, one day I'm going to die, and I'm not going to take anything of that with me. So then the question is who am I? And that who I will be after death is also the essential me that really exists right now. And this makes meditation on death meditation simply. That's meditation. You learn to be without anything attached to your being, to your deepest soul. So last question.
I'm very intrigued by the last part you have read, when Socrates speaks indirectly to the other philosopher.
Yes.
And tells him basically he needs to die, or he should die.
Yes, tell him to follow me, yes.
And I really wonder here if he meant that so literally, or actually because it is kind of strange that he gives him so much credit, because he does, with, that he could not reach this level of poetry that the other one writes, for example.
Mm-hmm.
He being a great person himself, and but then he tells him to die. So I wonder if he might hint towards like you might want to look into this. Maybe you find something there. You might find some revelation here.
So what is the question?
The question is there for philosophy or for him as a poet
Yes.
something great to discover in death that may make him even greater?
Oh, Socrates, in his defense during his trial, he has a very impressive description how he went to meet all types of people, hoping that they knew something. You see, this is in his ironic way that he was like looking and listening to many wise people, and questioning whether they were really wise. That's why I think they gave him the poison, because nobody wants to be revealed as non-wise. So one of the descriptions includes his meetings with poets. And he says, I met poets and they were just, and then I realized that poets, they had moments of inspiration, but this didn't mean that they knew anything aside from their art, you see? Now, Venus specifically was not only a poet, he was also a teacher, a sophist, a lecturer, you see? And Socrates actually feels here that Venus can actually understand what he means, you see? Otherwise, he wouldn't, he regards him to a certain degree as a sort of another teacher, you see?
Yeah.
But also stating that I think Socrates wants now to enter a real discussion. He wants to provoke. He wants to shock. Because until now, the discussion was pretty slow. And suddenly, he throws this bomb into the room. And now everyone is intrigued. Everyone has to understand. And that sets the stage to this final discussion. So, this is it for now. As you can surely feel, this was just a very gentle beginning, feeling this new world that we're entering. And next week we will begin to delve into the text and to meditate together also on the text, to meditate on death, as Constantinus asked me. So, thank you for being here, and we will meet in 1 week.
Thank you.
Thank you.